I have something to make up for from last week. Last week on the show, I said this year's Rolex 24 was the record for car counts at the 24-hour race. It has since come to my attention that that was wrong, so I am correcting that here. Hello, everybody. I was wrong, and I'm sorry, and I'm joined on the mic by Compos Mentis Chris Whitfield and Caitlin Penny Cognitive Function. Hello, everybody, and welcome along to this episode of the Motorsport Recently Show. Guys, welcome along.
Thank you very much, Jack. Yeah, we all do it. We all make mistakes like that. Well done for correcting yourself so quickly, and we can get on with today, where I'm sure everything will go absolutely to plan.
I had to make up and restore the journalistic integrity of this weekly podcast.
SMH.
SMH. And
Not
Chris Whitfield.
your sources.
Chris Whitfield currently not on camera as he is mid-meal, so that's very polite. How are you, Chris?
I'm alright. It's... The temperature outside is hot.
It's hot. So that's a Star Wars reference for those in our audience this week.
It's about minus 1,000 out there with the wind chill of minus 1,500 at the moment. Not pleasant. Not pleasant.
Not pleasant? Well, as I look out my window, it's a lovely sunny morning in Australia. Caitlin, how's the... Well, my goodness, this is real proper small talk here. How's the weather in UK land?
My computer says 3 degrees Celsius cloudy, so pretty typical for a January night in the United Kingdom.
That's balmy.
That is yes. Well, there's the weather for you. This is a real news show now because we're talking about the weather. It's gone a little bit beyond motorsport at this point. I think we should actually talk about some motor racing because we do have plenty of stories to get through this week. Different from last week, we have some genuinely and mostly verifiable facts on the show this week, so that's good. And we'll also have some listener comments at the end of this episode as well, so stick around for that one. Now, in the first 2 episodes of the newly revived podcast, we've spent a lot of time talking about sports car racing, and that hasn't given our dear Caitlin a lot of time to talk about her specialist subject, which is, of course, Formula One. So I thought this week we'd probably open with one of the biggest racing stories for a very long time, actually, because this was reported on Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera is a fairly serious news site, so it should also be talked about on another very serious news source, the Motorsport Recently Show, and that is, of course, Lewis Hamilton's very first day at Scuderia Ferrari.
Yeah, it just so happens that one of the first Formula One stories we're going to talk about in depth on this channel is one that I don't think is particularly important.
Really?
The thing with Formula One is that obviously the teams and the mechanics and stuff don't get much coverage, whereas the drivers do. So Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari, it should really be the other way around. It should really be kind of what's Ferrari going to do this year about Lewis Hamilton, what kind of car are they going to provide for him. But yeah, obviously it's the driver who does all the work at the end of the day, the driver who brings home the points. So it is important that they settle in nicely. Obviously the last few days have just been about getting him settled in to his new team. The media hype has been extensive. There is basically nothing else in my feed right now, and if you just look up Formula One and you go onto news, like, it's just Lewis Hamilton, bit of Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton. It's pretty intense, actually. But yeah, so obviously Lewis's first day at Ferrari has been coming for a while. It was reported that he would be moving to Ferrari nearly a year ago. and of course was one of the biggest Formula One stories for years, almost instantly, with a 7-time world champion going to the most successful and prestigious Formula One team of all time. You've put a question mark here in the show notes saying, "Is this the most covered first day in Formula One?" Probably, yeah. I mean, obviously, the test that he's done with the 2023 Ferrari car, which we'll get onto in a minute, wasn't too well covered because obviously they don't really allow spectators around the Fiorano circuit, and it's all done quite secretively, with the exception of the pictures and videos that they release. When Michael Schumacher moved to Ferrari, and even when Nigel Mansell moved to Ferrari, they made a bigger show of it in terms of kind of their first test in the car. But in terms of in the social media age, yeah, this is absolutely the biggest first day that anyone's had at a team. Obviously, he got his pictures in front of a Ferrari F40 in a black suit. Apparently, the Ferrari F40 is his favourite supercar.
And I read that as well.
Yeah, it's been reported on as if it's just general knowledge, which makes me wonder, did he say that when he was racing for Mercedes, or did they make him go, nah, we want the Mercedes AMG SLS GT3 or whatever?
Well, Lewis Hamilton did own several Ferraris whilst he was at Mercedes. So I believe he had a LaFerrari actually. Well, I think he still would have a LaFerrari. But he also has an AMG GT1, which is the hypercar with the Formula One race engine and that. But it also should be noted, there's a lot of drinking going on in the background. I hear Chris slurping away, and Caitlin having an absolutely monumental chug of that there for a second. But anyway, so yes, F40 was the last car that Enzo Ferrari worked on. I believe that was outside of Enzo Ferrari's house as well.
Yes, it was. The famous, not exactly sure what it's called, but basically the Enzo Ferrari Square, where all of the pictures are taken with Ferraris. And so obviously that picture has gone viral, people saying it's giving Professor Snape vibes. I can see it. I really can.
Professor Snape, very good.
Yeah.
Do you know what?
Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Hello. I have to admit, but I have to say this. He's got the drip.
Yes, he does.
Lewis has
he certainly
drip,
does.
my friend. Like,
sure.
That was quite a suit, actually. That looked fantastic. And correct me if I'm wrong.
It looked a little like Tuxedo Mask.
Tuxedo. I'm not sure I know what that looks like.
And yes, I just referenced Sailor Moon.
Oh,
on a
okay, that will be why. I have not seen Sailor Moon, so I wouldn't know. But
I grew up with it. But the thing is, he showed up with it. I'm like, oh, okay. Man's got the drip. Respect.
I think it was very classy to rock up in that suit. I've
converted myself from 5 years ago into a Lewis Hamilton fan, I guess.
Ah, very nice.
There you go.
One of the reasons, of course, that his first test session for Ferrari was so kind of hyped up is because it's come quite late. A lot of the other drivers, especially the drivers who are moving to a new team, such as Carlos Sainz moving to Williams, were able to drive their cars in the Abu Dhabi post-season test, and obviously drive the most recent, 2024 spec machinery in the Abu Dhabi test. Lewis Hamilton was not able to do that because he was still contracted to Mercedes at the time. They had the option to release him from his contract early, but they decided that, after 11 years in the team, it would be right for him to go around the Mercedes facilities and say goodbye to everyone and do his handshakes and things. So that is why he was not released from his Mercedes contract early. It meant that he was not able to drive the most recent Ferrari, the 2024 Ferrari, and the test that he ended up doing, which was so heavily publicized at the over the course of this week, was actually in a 2023 Ferrari, because that comes under previous car testing, which is less restricted than than current car testing. So he hasn't yet driven a kind of like up-to-date Ferrari Formula One car. For that he will have to wait until either they do a shakedown, what's called a filming day. You're allowed 4 of those, although realistically the teams mainly use them to shake down their cars. And then, of course, he will test the car for real in the preseason test at Bahrain with everyone else. But yeah, obviously, pretty much everyone else got to drive their, at least last year's car, more or sooner than Lewis Hamilton did, and it was almost tantalizing for the press. They were so ready to jump on the Lewis Hamilton hype train and picture him in red in a Ferrari, but you know, that's finally happened. He's done some laps of the Fiorano circuit. We got some photos out of it. We've got some videos out of it. I can't imagine they would have got much data out of it, especially since it is a 2-year-old car now, and Lewis was just getting up to speed. And you know, it's the first time he's ever driven a Formula One car that doesn't have a Mercedes engine in it. The Ayrton Senna McLaren that he drove, would that have been a Mercedes engine, or was that still Honda at that point?
That was still Honda.
Honda.
Yeah.
Probably Honda, yeah.
Mercedes, I think they came on board with McLaren, I want to say
1995.
It was 95, yeah. Yeah,
95.
so it would have still been a Honda that he drove, but this is the first time that he's driven a hybrid Formula One car with anything other than a Mercedes power unit. So that's one thing that he's got to get used to. The Ferrari, of course, has slightly different characteristics. They're usually quite grunty out of the corner, whereas Mercedes has the overall top speed and power. But yeah, I can't imagine they would have got that much data out of the little shakedown he's done at Fiorano. It was mainly just a pomp and ceremony of, you know, welcome to the team, welcome to Ferrari, mamma mia, here you go.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of that first test that Michael Schumacher did in '95 when he drove in early 1990. Oh, actually, no, late '95 when he drove a V10 powered 412T, I believe it was.
Was that a V10? I feel like that would have been too early.
It was because it was a test mule, actually, because
oh, okay.
It was the test mule for the V10 engine. He did a few laps, like ceremonial ones, in one of Jean Alesi's chassis, I think, but it was retrofitted with a V10 engine.
Okay, that explains that then, because I think 412 would have been too early to run a V10 in competition, so that explains that.
They had been testing it through 95, but they actually they did the first test with Michael Schumacher in late 1995, and it actually reminds me a lot. There's a lot of comparisons between the two that I'm seeing from.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 7-time world champion. Obviously, Schumacher wasn't a 7-time world champion yet, but two of the greats of the sport, both moving unexpectedly to the prancing horse, trying to bring it back from a losing streak. And I guess that leads on to the question of, you know, will Lewis Hamilton actually fit in with Ferrari? There is a school of thought which says that he's going to be a little bit shocked by Charles Leclerc. Obviously, Charles Leclerc very much has the backing of Ferrari. He's had the longest Ferrari contract in history, and we all know how good Charles Leclerc is. We know that he basically retired Sebastian Vettel. He is going to be a tough opponent, and a lot of people think that Lewis Hamilton is going to falter in Charles's presence. Obviously, the last couple of years, Lewis has not been doing quite so well against George Russell, and it's kind of made it seem that Lewis only excels in good cars. I disagree with that. I would like to remind you of in the past where he started the season with a car that's not so good, and he's worked and worked until he brings it back and then is genuinely with a chance of the championship. Think 2009, think 2013, think even more recently 2017 and 18 when Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel started the year with the better car, and then Lewis came back and won the championship. So I don't think that Lewis just gives up and rolls over when it looks hopeless for him. And I think that he still has it. I think the real question mark is going to be Ferrari, because Ferrari are insanely unpredictable. They don't learn from their mistakes. They make way too many mistakes through simple arrogance and sheer bloody-mindedness. And honestly, I think that whether or not Lewis Hamilton gels with Ferrari depends on whether or not Ferrari let him gel with them. So we'll see how that
Didn't he
goes.
bring
But
some of his old Mercedes people with him?
he did. He brought
did.
his race director, sorry, not race director, his physio, Angela Cullen,
Yes.
with him. He's actually founded a project called Project 44, which is, and you've put a note about it here, actually, I see, Jack.
Yeah,
Well done for
in my
that.
little show notes, yeah.
Hamilton's company he made to assist with his new era at Ferrari. Angela Cullen is the most notable person who he's brought over with him. Of course, she was his physio and personal trainer at Mercedes, and she has come with him to Ferrari. We don't yet know who his race engineer is going to be either. That's another thing that we've got to wait and see, whether or not he's going to get along with his new race engineer. To be honest, it's going to be sad to hear him not crying to Bono over the radio all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
Giancarlo, my tyres are gone, doesn't have the same kind of ring to it, does it?
No, it doesn't. But yeah, no, I think you are definitely right, and I think you made a very interesting point about whether Ferrari let him gel with the team, and I think back to Carlos Sainz Jr. Now, I personally think that if Ferrari were able to run three cars, they would be running Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and Carlos Sainz Jr. But that is, of course, not the case. I think that Carlos Sainz Jr. was probably as good, and in many cases actually better than Charles Leclerc.
Yeah.
But because Charles Leclerc was Sergio Marchionne's golden boy and basically slated as the guy who was going to bring Ferrari back to the front, I think that Carlos Sainz Jr. always had to take a back seat. And I think there are probably 1 or 2 years at least in Carlos Sainz Jr.'s time at Ferrari where he could have beaten Charles Leclerc in the championship, but there were cases where Ferrari prioritized Charles Leclerc, and that was how he was able to beat him in the championship.
But he did beat him in the championship once, 2021, I think. Finished ahead by, something like 5 points or something. He's definitely capable of it. And I do think Carlos was pretty hard done by in this all. He was absolutely good enough to be an equal number one to Charles Leclerc in Ferrari. It reminds me of the days where they had Kimi Raikkonen alongside Felipe Massa. 2 number ones, none of them really giving way to the other. But Ferrari doesn't run like that anymore. They need a number one and a number two. And I was very, very surprised when Lewis Hamilton came in to Ferrari, because that is simply not going to be the case anymore. So I just think Carlos got really hard done by it. He was absolutely good enough to keep with the team. Won 2 races last year. He was the only non-Red Bull driver to win a race in 2023, don't forget. And you're absolutely right.
That's true.
He is, in terms of his absolute potential cap, he is as good as Charles Leclerc. And the only reason that he is not continuing on with Ferrari is simply because they got a new, shiny new toy.
And I think also, I do want to mention a very specific case study. I remember in the immediate wake of the Australian Grand Prix in 2024, this was, of course, one of the races that Carlos Sainz won with Ferrari, and we knew that he was leaving the team at this point. There were genuine conversations in the aftermath of that race that were saying Ferrari chose the wrong guy.
Yeah,
and I think it certainly is sad to see him go. And actually, I want to just bring this back. We mentioned earlier in the episode that this is probably one of the biggest covered first days for a driver at a new team. And I'd say the second biggest covered first day, try saying that fast, in recent times before Lewis Hamilton's first day at Ferrari was actually Carlos Sainz's first day at Williams.
he's a popular guy, yeah. People want to see him do well because it's pretty clear that he was hard done by. So, yeah, people want to see him do well at Williams. I think he's going to have a pretty hard time as well since, obviously, he's up against Alex Albon. Alex is consistently underrated. In fact, the last 2 years, when I've done my... I've posted predictions, or not predictions, but I posted summaries on Blue Sky where I've... collated the top 10 drivers of the Formula One Championship. Both years, so 2023 and 2024, Alex Albon has been in my top 3 drivers of the year. He is consistently underrated and one of the best drivers in Formula One right now. But then again, so is Carlos Sainz. So, you know, it's going to be pretty even between the two of them. Obviously, being in a Williams, Sainz is not going to be winning races this year. I would be very surprised if he gets a podium, maybe on a really surprising day like Sao Paulo 2024 or whatever. Maybe he could snag something.
Maybe.
But
Well, you say that, but I think he could have a 1997 Damon Hill type season where
he could,
unless the throttle cable snaps again.
yeah, I think it was a spark plug with Hill or something like that. But
I thought
anyway,
I thought it was actually a throttle cable.
well, I was actually watching my video. God, we're going on a tangent now. I rewatched my video on Damon Hill's career earlier today because I wanted to remind myself of some of the storylines, and that was one of the things I covered. And I can't remember exactly what I said failed on his car, but I remember that it was something really, really cheap, like 5 pence or something. It would have been like a single bolt on a spark plug or something like that. I don't really know, but you know, that's Damon Hill 1997, and yeah, I can definitely see some similarities with Sainz, where, like, you know, it was a real shock when they dropped Hill because it's like, why? They're literally getting rid of the world champion. And with Sainz, you know, they got rid of one of the best drivers in Formula One. And, you know, it's just because they got a shiny new toy. And I think that it's not a case of them dropping the wrong driver. I think it would have been a scandal if they dropped Charles Leclerc as well. Like, if they dropped Charles Leclerc, people would still have been saying they dropped the wrong driver. The fact that they dropped any driver in the first place was the shocking thing.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, having watched some of the 1993 races, I seem to recall that Mika Hakkinen was actually going to be the main driver for that lineup with Michael Andretti. But Ayrton Senna could not figure out whether or not he wanted to stay with the team. He was basically on a race-by-race basis until quite late in the season, if I remember correctly. And Hakkinen was actually on the driver lineup on the official entry list that year.
I mean, he got to race in the end anyway when Michael Andretti dropped out, but this, I'm afraid, Chris, with the utmost respect, is completely irrelevant.
Yes.
Fair enough. It should. I want to bring it back to Williams just for a second. Williams have an all Red Bull lineup for 2025. Both
Red Bull
Junior drivers. Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite funny actually. When I was thinking about this earlier, how Williams tends to be a seat either for upcoming Red Bull drivers or rejected Red Bull drivers. And I think it's pretty sad, actually. But then again, you could say that about the majority of the grid. There are Red Bull drivers just all over the place. And, I'm glad that... Because Red Bull have such a revolving door of drivers. I'm glad that sometimes they get another chance elsewhere. Alex Albon, as I said, one of the best drivers in Formula One. And if he dropped out of Formula One, that would have been an absolute travesty. And Carlos Sainz, of course, up alongside him. At least we know they can kind of trauma bond amongst themselves as they finish 15th in a race or whatever.
With Jaime Alguersuari spinning the
decks.
record.
Yeah, that's true. For those of you who don't know, Jaime Alguersuari became a DJ for our listeners at home. Although I should mention, Carlos Sainz wasn't necessarily dropped from the Red Bull program. He was originally loaned to Renault, if I remember correctly, and then that sort of led to him to going to other places.
Yep.
That is a correct fact. Thank you very much for confirming that.
That's okay.
I do want to bring it back to Lewis Hamilton for a second there, though. So there's a little bit also of speculation about... So we're talking about the photo that had the F40 in the background. In the background of one of those photos, there was 7 windows on the building and 1 door. And many are speculating that photo was composed with the windows being 7 world championships and the door to his 8th world championship.
I think that is
a bit of a reach.
I think that's reading too far into stuff. Yeah, that's like when an English teacher shows you a passage which is like, the boat was green, and she's like, but why was the goat green? Maybe the author was trying to signify envy, or maybe, and you're like, it's just a green boat, innit?
Hang on, I've got some straws to grasp.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, well, there we go. Back off with things that aren't exactly verifiable. We really just come on here and make stuff up. But something that isn't made up. We've also seen Lewis Hamilton in his Ferrari race gear, and we've also seen his Ferrari helmet as well. Any thoughts on how that looks?
Looks good. Looks fast.
Looks
no
red
further
and
questions.
yellow.
Yeah.
You could get a McDonald's sponsorship.
You could. Oh my goodness. Or radical. That's like the radical colours, right?
Mm-hmm. A radical Dallara colours as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dallara. But there you go.
I think my predictions for Lewis for this year, it's I think going to be a bit like 1996 for Michael Schumacher. How he might struggle at first. Then once he gets the car built around him, progress starts to come up, and he'll win a few races this year, and he'll win a few races by the end of the year. I'll tell you that much.
I've been saying this
championship contender within 3.
Okay.
I've been saying this before. Even before the 2024 season ended, but 2025 is such an unpredictable year. It's such a question mark because we ended the year. Normally you can tell who's going to be quick by who ends the previous year, with the momentum. And in 2024, who that was is actually not very clear whatsoever.
I'd say there was somebody who ended the year with clear momentum, and I would say that it was McLaren that ended 2024 the strongest.
But was it though? Because Ferrari, McLaren were winning races in the mid part of the year. Ferrari were coming back towards the end. There was a point where they were not expected to be in the fight for the Constructors' Championship at the very end, and they brought that back with their 1-2 in Austin, and they ended the season with some quite impressive momentum. McLaren, of course, also did. But then again, Max Verstappen had a resurgence. He went the middle of the year, he won nothing. The end of the year, he won 2. So, he had a resurgence. Who knows who's going to have the pace coming into 2024? It could honestly, if it's Ferrari, we could have a championship fight between Hamilton and Leclerc. You could throw McLaren into that mix. Red Bull is a big question mark. We don't know if they're going to bounce back from whatever they had before. We don't know if they're actually going to support Liam Lawson or not, or whether he's going to be just thrown to the lions like Checo. Who's to say Mercedes can't produce something interesting? You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Aston Martin turn up with a rocket ship. I mean, we'd only find out with one of their drivers, but still, like, that's, it's a possibility. The fact is, we don't know how Lewis Hamilton's going to do next year, this year, because we don't know where Ferrari's going to be in the pecking order, and that is one of the great unknowns, and I cannot wait for pre-season testing. Oh my goodness.
That's true. I was actually just about to say, just before you said that, I was going to hark back to something you said earlier on this Ferrari point, but you've just mentioned it there. How Lewis Hamilton does this year really depends on the type of year Ferrari decide to have, because if because it could be we don't know. It could be a 2020 type year where they just go backwards again. I don't think it will be, but I mean, as a wise man once said, anything can happen in Formula One, and it usually does. Yes,
and it usually does.
Yeah, there we go.
2024 I was actually pretty impressed with Ferrari in 2024, because I had been saying from 2014 all the way through to 2023 that Ferrari do not learn from their mistakes ever, and they always find a way to muck it up. And somehow in 2024 they actually had races where they were on the ball, where they were awake. They did also have some silly mistakes, but they had more occasions which actually did seem to show hope. I'm thinking Monza, for example, where I fully expected them to bring Charles Leclerc into the pits just for the sake of it, and then lose the race as a result of that. They didn't. They left him out. They let him win the race. Same thing with Austin. They got the strategy right there. And I just think that, could this be this long foretold shake-up that Fred Vasseur was supposed to bring to Ferrari? Could it be that Ferrari's woes are actually beginning to be put behind them? I feel like we could well see a Ferrari resurgence soon, potentially as early as 2025, but again, you never know with Ferrari. They could be the legends that, their prestige would have you believe that they are, or they could be an absolute clown show. Who knows?
Who knows? That's true.
You can't go worse than 1980.
Yes, no. Everyone who says 2020 was Ferrari's worst year, it wasn't. 1980 was. That is a definitive fact. I saw people
Jody
in 2020
missed a race.
Yeah, that's true.
1973 was pretty bad, but 1980.
I don't think it was as bad as 1980.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and 1992 as well.
I remember in 2020 when everyone was saying 2020 is Ferrari's worst year. It wasn't. It was 1980. But who knows what 2024 is 2025 is going to be like? Oh goodness me, I'm not used to that fact.
That's $1 in the jar.
$1 in the jar. It's true. Before we move on, I'm actually wearing Lewis Hamilton's T-shirt this episode. There we go. Very relevant.
He's got a golf course now.
Well, no. So Golfmatic Racing. This is a collaboration between Tyler the Creator and Lewis Hamilton.
Really?
For a fashion line, it is. Yeah, no, it's a Christmas present. Anyway, right, okay, I think we should actually move on to something that's semi-relevant other than talking about what I'm actually wearing, which is only relevant to those actually watching the video feed, which some people might not be. Anyway,
I miss Cedric the Entertainer.
Should we move on to some sports car news? Because we have many things. Chris Whitfield's very excited because we're moving on to his specialist subject.
I guess I'll let you guys take the reins then.
We have some WEC driver news to talk about, and I think probably the biggest driver news story that has emerged in the last week is the fact that Peugeot have confirmed their lineup for hypercars in 2025. So in the number 93 car, Paul di Resta is moving across from the 94 car to replace the departing Nico Müller, and he will be joined by Mikkel Jensen and Jean-Eric Verne. And in the 94 car, that car will be driven by Loic Duval, rookie Malte Jakobsen, who is making his WEC debut. That's not including Le Mans, where he has previously raced in LMP2 machinery. And Malte Jakobsen is replacing di Resta on the 94 car, and Stoffel van Dorn completes that lineup.
Did Paul di Resta at least get like a fancy photo shoot with a black robe in front of like the Eiffel Tower or something? I don't know. What did Peugeot do?
I don't know, but they did
Break
an
down
Instagram
mostly?
post.
Oh.
Breakdown mostly. Very good. Very good. I wonder what kind of year Peugeot are going to have, because they've had, this is, oh goodness me, how many years is that racing the 9X8 now? This will be year 4 for that car, if memory serves me correctly. Because it was 21 that car made its debut at Monza, I seem to remember.
22, I think.
What was it? I swear it was earlier than that. Because it was the sort of transitional year. I thought it was.
To the Google.
To the Google. I remember them making their debut alongside Glickenhaus, so that was I think it was 2021, but I could be wrong. But anyway, that car's been developed over the years. Fact checking, making sure our facts are verifiable.
We are checking.
Copy, we are checking.
That's
Copy,
relevant
we are
considering we just
checking.
talked about Ferrari.
Yep, 2022.
2022, so I was wrong. Okay, never mind. I do apologise. I'm still wrong. So yes, that is the Peugeot lineup confirmed. Malte Jakobsen, I think, is an interesting one for that one, because he has, through the years, risen up through the ranks of the European Le Mans Series and through the Asian Le Mans Series as well. Really young, talented, up-and-coming driver, and he is getting to make his hypercar debut, which is very interesting.
He'll be racing at Daytona, actually.
He will be racing at Daytona. I forgot who it was with, though.
Let me check the guide de spotters.
There we go. We're checking again.
We are checking.
Caitlin, have you got anything to say on Peugeot?
No. Sorry.
Fair enough. Okay.
I have noticed actually the car, even though it could be seen as out of date because it's in its 3rd, 4th season now, it does seem to keep getting better. I do think they are developing it pretty well. Like,
yes,
I was pretty disappointed with Peugeot when it first came into the WEC, because that was when we were still very much in the Toyota era, where it looked like Toyota were just going to continue dominating forever. And I was disappointed at first. The Peugeot, it's still not the best, but it seems to be getting closer at least, and occasionally it will deliver a result where I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it's getting there.
Yeah, I mean, I will say Peugeot were very brave to admit that they'd probably made a bit of a mistake not putting a rear wing on the back of that car, which they then did, and then the car started getting better.
It was effective at Le Mans.
Well, it is. I think that's the problem with the Peugeot. It only works well at Le Mans, because take it to tracks like Sebring and to take it to other tracks, it just isn't good, because it's so optimized for Le Mans, which is very straight line speed, that when you take it to a track where outright top speed isn't as much of a factor, it doesn't do as well.
I really liked the they actually put a decal on the car, on the rear of the car. I saw a picture of it on, I think, Reddit, where it was, I didn't want a rear wing, or I don't want a rear wing.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Also, Malte Jakobsen will be in the CrowdStrike by APR.
The LMP2 car.
LMP2 car with George Kurtz, Malte Jakobsen, of course, Toby Sowery, and Colton Herta.
Okay, we should probably move on, because we've got plenty of other driver announcements to get through as well. Next one, we're actually going to talk about this on the show in miscellaneous, the miscellaneous section last week, but we didn't get time to do that, so we're going to do it now. And there's also been a bit of a development on that front as well. So Valentino Rossi is going to be staying at BMW in the LMGT3 class for 2025. We were going to mention that last week, but since then, BMW have actually completed their WEC GT lineup. So the number 31 car will be driven by Timur Boguslavski, easy for me to say, Augusto Farfus, and Yasser Shahin. So this is the Bend WRT car, on account of, I suspect, Yasser Shahin being there.
Yep,
because he is
Shahin,
Australian.
Yeah.
And the number 46 car will be driven by Ahmed Al-Harthi, Kelvin van der Linde, and Valentino Rossi, as we just mentioned.
Kelvin of the Linds.
Kelvin of the Linz. I'd
As,
say I don't.
As a friend of mine who is from the Netherlands has said, Van der apparently is actually of the in
Of the,
English.
yes. Is that why you mentioned the of the Sands thing with Renger van der Zande
Yes.
last week?
Literally translated as of the sands.
Of the Sands.
Yes.
So when you say Zandvoort, it's sand something. I tried to translate that a while ago.
I think it means sandcastle.
That would make sense.
Because
I thought it
because I think
Literally
Vort,
sand fort, yeah.
I thought it
Vort,
was anyway.
I think is castle or something.
Anyway, if there are any Dutch listeners, please write to us in the comments section below, because we actually are. We're going to get to this later in the show. We actually are reading listener comments now.
But do write to us in English because we don't speak Dutch.
Yeah, we don't speak Dutch. That's partially the problem here.
I might actually take up another language, but actually, I need to bone up on my Quebec French.
Well, it's also, in terms of that, it's really how many threatening messages are you willing to tolerate from Duolingo.
Yeah.
Anyway, right, okay, so that's really, on account of that, we've covered absolutely nothing relevant at all on the BMW front, because we've literally just been talking about Dutch and Duolingo.
I mean, in fairness, it's good to see Il Dottore back in a BMW.
That's true. I'd also say that Valentino Rossi has really impressed me as a BMW driver.
Yeah,
He's done
has.
very, very well in his first few years, and it's good to see that he'll be staying with the team.
And yes, I did call him Il Dottore.
Oh, yes, that's I'm surprised that I didn't pick up on that.
The
Anyway,
doctor.
well, yes, that makes sense. We're doing well on the language front today.
Stethoscope in hand.
All right, okay, we should probably move on to our next announcement on that front. So Proton has overhauled its lineup. So this is the number 99 Porsche 963. So Neil Jani will be staying on the team, but Andlauer and Tinknell have left. So that's those two drivers gone. And in their place will be Nico Pino and Nico Veron.
Because I believe... Where's Harry going?
I feel like he went to... Where did he go? I feel like he went to Proton to drive the Mustang, so that could be wrong. For some reason, that sounds right to me.
Yeah, that does sound right. Well, he's going to be in the Gradient Mustang at Daytona.
Okay, so I'm partially right at least.
And, yeah, Harry will be.
Harry Tinknell is actually driving for Aston Martin in the WEC this year. He's going to be driving the 007.
That's
Sorry about that.
the driver lineup there. And
yes. So I was partially correct on that front. So he is driving a Mustang, just not in the FIA World Endurance Championship.
And... Yeah, and, trying to find out where Julian Andlauer is going to be. I think he's in a... Well, he's going to be in the Proton car at Daytona.
Oh, I can tell you
The
where
Mustang
Julian
sampling
Andlauer's
entry.
gone. Julian Andlauer has gone to the factory number 5, the Porsche Penske car in the FIA World Endurance Championship.
Oh, excellent! Good for him.
So he's moving up in the world, but privateers still can compete.
Yeah.
Properly in the World Endurance Championship. And of course, we talked about Nico Pino on the show last week. Very, very
And
talented
also,
young driver.
If anyone from Proton is watching this, and I hope they are, please fix the livery. Please fix the livery. Bring back the fat turbo. Bring back the fat turbo.
We have a comment about liveries later. We'll get on to that.
We do have we have a comment about livery, and we also have a story about liveries as well. Moving on, more announcements. Christian Reed will be making his full season return to the FIA World Endurance Championship, and he will be driving with Iron Lynx Mercedes. The Iron Lynx lineup consists of the number 60 car, which Matteo Cressoni, Maxime Martin, and Claudio Schiavone will be driving. Now, Maxime Martin also said earlier in the week that the reason that he's gone to Mercedes is because he wasn't getting the LMDH opportunities he wanted to at BMW, so he's gone to a manufacturer that doesn't have an LMDH program, which is an interesting career choice. Yet, that's true. And then the other car, the 61 car, Christian Reed, I believe is the only confirmed driver for that car at the moment.
It is, yeah.
Yes. And I should mention, so Iron Lynx, they're the team that's going to be running Mercedes this year. But here's the confusing part. Iron Dames is with Porsche. So I might have gotten that slightly wrong on the show last week because I remember talking about them. So Iron Lynx are with Porsche. So Iron Dames are with Porsche. But then Iron Lynx are running the Mercedes effort.
So I can sort of explain that. So the Iron Dames is actually a separate entity, if I remember correctly. They are going to be taking the slot that was the slot of the champions of the series last year, the EMP Manthey team, the GT3 champion. They are going to be the team is actually Iron Dames is going to be, easy for me to say, is going to be taking over and run by Manthey next year in WEC. And also I believe Proton Competition is running their car in IMSA, because they are doing the I believe they're doing the full Michelin Endurance Cup in 2025, but don't quote me on that just yet. But yeah, I believe that's the that's what I know so far about.
Okay.
Just so there's no confusion.
I've just had a thought. You
Yes.
know how Iron Lynx kind of came first, and then they made a women's team and they called it Iron Dames.
Yeah.
Why didn't
Yes.
they call it? Why didn't they call it Iron Maidens? Like, it's so obvious.
Oh. Well, there probably would have been... There would have... Oh, actually, yeah, that is actually a really good point.
It's,
Although I
it's
suspect
like
that
it's
would have
right
been...
there.
Yeah, no, it is right there. Actually, that is true. But then I think the problem with that is that there may have been a lawsuit that may have happened as a result of that.
I don't think so, because honestly, like, usually the law only applies to when you have two different entities in the same, like, I don't want to get too legal, but like two entities of the same variety. So like you couldn't start up a restaurant and call it Wendy's or whatever. Like,
yes, that's true.
but you could, if your name was Wendy or whatever, you could start up a racing team and call it Wendy's Racing Team. And like that would be fine. That would be absolutely fine. So like
For anyone that's watching, by the way, Google Wendy's Belgium on that topic, because there's actually lore to
something
that.
happened like that, didn't they?
Yeah, it was
But
a lawsuit.
honestly,
They
they could absolutely have called it Iron Maidens. I'm sure they could have done that.
That's true. I should also mention one of the main things we should talk about with the Iron Lynx thing, with Christian Reed coming back to the FIA World Endurance Championship full time, is that up until his sort of retirement, he was, I believe, the only driver since the WEC was introduced in 2012 to have completed every single event up until he stopped his full-time career.
Oh, wow.
He ran a couple of races after he'd technically retired in the Gradient Mustang. I think it was last year or the year before that. But
the Gradient Mustang.
Wait, oh, not Gradient Mustang. Sorry, the Proton Mustang. Or the Mustang. Whoever's running the Mustang.
Yeah, it would be Proton, or would have been Proton, but they've switched to Porsche, I believe. But, I will say, order has been restored. Christian Reed is back on the WEC grid, as God intended.
So just confirming that. Actually, no. So he I think was probably the reserve driver for Proton. His last race before then was in 2023 when he was doing GTE AM with Dempsey Proton Racing. So there's that. So welcome back, Christian Reed. We have Akodis ASP Lexus have also completed their driver lineup for 2025. So the number 78 car will be driven by Ben Barnico, Arnold Robin, who has been retained at the team for another year, and Finn Gersitz. I'm being very careful about the pronunciation of that because we had a conversation about swear jars before this started. And in the 87 car, it's going to be Jose Maria Lopez, Razvan Umbrarescu, and Clemens Schmid completing that lineup.
I knew a different driver called Umbrarescu. Pietro Umbrarescu. This is completely irrelevant. I think he was like a Formula 4 driver or something. Maybe a relation?
Could have been his brother?
Could have been.
Also, it looks as though the factory drivers for this lineup are still Ben Barnicat and Pachito. I believe I forget, because in GT3 I believe there's supposed to be one bronze driver per lineup.
I think Robin is the silver or the bronze. Let me pull up the
entry list here, because the WEC entry list was revealed actually shortly after we recorded last week's podcast.
It's an interesting time for sports cars, so I think there's a lot happening driver-wise, which is why we're covering it. Later probably next month or the month after that, whenever the WEC starts, we'll most likely do a WEC preview show. Anyway, while you check that, I want to just talk about the last of the major things I want to talk about driver news-wise. So Sebastian Bourd is moving over from TF Sport to join the United McLaren entry. We talked a little bit about this in the first episode of the show. So the 59 car will be driven by Sebastian Bourd. James Cottingham, I think was the name. Forgive me, I've slightly messed up my show notes here. Yes, James Cottingham in the 59 car, and Gregoire Saucy completes the 59 lineup. And then we mentioned the 95 on the first show of the reboot, which will be driven by Darren Lung, Sean Galisle. Bruh. Thank you for adding that to my show notes and reminding me of that. And Marino Sato completes that. We need to get Josh
Revel on the show.
We need to get Josh Revel on the show. I mean, I've collabed with Josh Revel before, so we could probably get him on again if he actually remembers who I am. But yes, did you confirm? Were you able to confirm who the bronze drivers were for ASP?
Well, it would be Arnold Robin. Yeah.
Yes.
I have to say, I just love the name Sebastian Bourd. It's like they tried to write Sebastian Bourdais, ex-Formula 1 driver and sports car racer, and just kind of like got bored, literally.
Yes, that's very true. Very, very true. And that, really, that sort of completes the WEC driver transfer news. Unless anybody has anything else they'd like to discuss on that front.
Not that I can see, no.
Okay, well in that case, it is time to move on to, and I think, Caitlin, would you like to usher in this new segment?
Do you mean miscellaneous stories and points that we missed and therefore are covering now, TM? Big. Yes,
and you've both done it at the same time. It's almost as if we rehearsed this. Well done.
We did, like 5 years ago.
Yes, we did. We should probably actually make a jingle for that, to be honest. But
I had a jingle.
We should bring the jingle back.
We should.
Yes.
Bring the jingle back.
But we also need visuals for it, because it's a partially visual show as well now. So we need actual... Anyway, right, so, okay, instead of talking about that, we should actually talk about the news in this section. And we start off with a story that I wanted to talk about last week, but has also since received developments since we were going to talk about this, and that is Cadillac have revealed their liveries for both the FIA World Endurance Championship and the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. This is, of course, Jota for WEC and Wayne Taylor Racing in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. That is, of course, the 2 gold cars in the WEC and the 2 Wayne Taylor cars in IMSA. And all of those cars look fantastic. I think you will all agree.
The chrome Cadillac, the number 40. Oof.
I like a chrome car. I like chrome cars.
They cooked with that paint, with that livery. Oof.
Well, to be fair, I actually don't think that since Cadillac started racing the DPI category and later the GTP category and also all of the categories associated with that there has actually... I don't think there's been a single bad Cadillac livery since they started recently racing prototypes. I've, of course, raced prototypes before, and I won't comment on those liveries, but in recent years...
I don't think Wayne Taylor Racing has ever had a bad-looking livery, to be honest. I remember actually the first time they raced with the black and yellow SunTrust colors on a Pontiac-powered Riley chassis, and looked really good to that. And then they ran that the Dallara that had flames, like the flame car, and honestly, they, like, I will say the Wayne Taylor Cadillac, the number 50, the number 40, like,
really good.
There's something about a chrome colored Cadillac. It reminds me a lot of the 2001 North Star LMP, the second Cadillac, not the first one, the second one, because it has the like the Cadillac colors of like the yellow and the black and the red and the chrome, and you might want to maybe pull that up on the screen in editing, but just gorgeous looking thing, and the 10's no slouch either, with the blue HP the blue HP chrome blue. Oof. Just
it looks fantastic.
Absolutely, they cooked with this.
But I'm actually, the reason I bring this up is I actually don't think that, as I said, I don't think in recent years there's been a bad Cadillac livery regardless of who was running it. So I would say all the Wayne Taylor cars look great. All of the Action Express cars have looked fantastic. The Juncos car looked great. The Visit Florida car looked fantastic as well. And especially now, the Jota car. Oh, the Chip Ganassi cars, they look great. I mean, some of the earlier Chip Ganassis weren't the best, but certainly the later cars with the blue and the gold car were fantastic.
Actually,
and now especially the Jota cars.
I liked the fire engine red burgundy one that Ganassi used to run. Beautiful. Just
they've
beautiful.
all been fantastic. They've all been brilliant.
Even the Whelan car looks looks great. Like with the white
the red,
roof, it actually looks really, really good.
Yeah, no, they've all looked fantastic, and now we know what the new ones are going to look like. Caitlin, any thoughts on Cadillac you'd like to express before we move it on to the next one?
So you could say the livery is another Cadillacin.
Oh, yeah, no, we're doing well with the puns on this show so far. Fantastic.
That's literally all I've got to say. I was just preparing that
pun. Bomb. That's stuck in my head now. You mentioned Cadillac, and now all I hear is Time Bomb.
Float like a Cadillac, sting like a Beamer.
We need to make... Tell like we have mentioned music so many times on this show. I think we need a Motorsport Recently Show playlist. I think I'll put that I'll put that together, and I'll put that in the link of the next episode. And every single time
Time Bomb by Rancid.
I'll throw that in there for the next episode.
Red coat, black shoes, white hat, Cadillac. That's the wrong. You strike that. Reverse it. You know what I mean.
Yes. Okay, so we've also got some gaming news to talk about. We've got some new cars for the WRC game, and those cars are set to release on January 28th. So the Citroen C2 R2 Max, the Citroen C3 WRC, the Citroen DS3 WRC from 2012, the Citroen Zara kit car, the Volkswagen Polo WRC 2013, and the Peugeot 206 S1600 are coming to the game in January or late January, specifically January 28th. Which I think this is the first time we've ever really covered rally news of any description, albeit virtual, on this show. So there you go.
Well, in fairness, we will probably be covering it next week because the Rally Monte Carlo is happening at the moment.
To be honest, I have not watched as much rallying as I should have throughout my life, so maybe next week is the time to start watching with the Monte Carlo rally. Anyway, should we move it on to something a little bit more familiar? Because I want to touch briefly on the Raw, which has just happened, really, at Daytona. That's very timely at the moment, considering what's happening in the world of sports cars. It's, of course, the Rolex 24 at Daytona this coming weekend at the time of recording. Quick summary from that, or at least a couple of my takeaways from that. So BMW are did pretty well in the testing at the Raw, which sort of enforces Chris's prediction from last week of BMW being a dark horse. So they topped 3 out of the 7 sessions in GTP, and Faf, funnily enough, in the Lamborghini, has emerged as contenders in GTD Pro, as they topped a number of sessions as well. But you never know, because they could all be sandbagging, so who knows?
Yep. Get your sandbag cutter knives out. There do be some sand.
Enough to build a Zandvoort. There we go.
Do you remember when everyone was complaining? This is going back like 7 years now. Everyone was complaining about the Ford GTs sandbagging at Daytona and Le Mans. And I remember on GT Hub, people were making memes about, who would win an entire field of thoroughbred GTE cars or 2 sandbaggy boys. I discovered one of those memes the other day, and I'm like, I remember those days.
Sometimes you do get genuine, gems of WEC memes. They're hard to come by, but they are actually very good. For a long time, they were probably better than a lot of Formula 1 memes, but that's a whole other conversation. Speaking of Formula 1, we do actually have a Formula 1 news story. So, Caitlin, you get to talk about your specialist subject again.
Let me just pick up on what you're saying. Yes. This is Esteban Ocon, of course, in his move to Haas. His race engineer has now been announced, and it is Laura Mueller, who I have to admit I haven't heard of before. She is catching the headlines because she is the first female race engineer in Formula 1 history. About damn time.
About damn time. There's another music drop for you. That's going in.
To be honest, I always feel sorry for the first female to do anything, because I feel like people forget who they actually are and what they've actually achieved, and it's all about a female. As a woman myself and as a trans woman, I get that. The headlines do tend to be, trans woman does this, woman does that, and it's I don't know, just Laura Mueller's clearly got that job because she's qualified for it. Isn't that what we need to focus on? But good for her. I'm looking forward to seeing how that partnership develops. And obviously Esteban Ocon, another one of the drivers, moving to a brand new Formula 1 team. So it's important that he has people around him that he can trust, and that he can get on well with, so that he settles into his new team nicely and can score some good points.
Didn't there used to actually be someone with Sauber? A woman that was running Sauber for a while, or
Are you thinking of Manisha Kaltenborn? She was
Yes.
the team principal of Sauber for a long time. Obviously, the team owner of Sauber is still Peter Sauber, but the actual, like, operational principal for a long time was Manisha Kaltenborn, yes.
Yeah. To be honest, I was actually surprised that that Laura Mueller is the first. I was surprised that there hadn't been a female race engineer before. There are plenty of women in Formula One, or probably not as many as there should be, but there are plenty of women in Formula One. So, but I was genuinely surprised to hear that she was the first female race engineer. I mean, I thought there would have been one by now. Anyway, right, we're moving back to sports cars. So Andrea Caldarelli and Marco Mappelli have been confirmed as the full season drivers for FAF in the Lamborghini for this year.
they're
Which is not particularly surprising, but there you go.
it's because they're Lamborghini factory drivers. That's the main thing, I think.
Yes. And also James Hinchcliffe would be far too busy to do that anyway.
Yeah, considering he's now with Fox in the IndyCar coverage, along with Townsend
Will
Bell
Buxton.
comes with and Will Buxton and T Bell, who is coming over from NBC.
Yes. And, well, Hinchcliffe is technically coming over from NBC as well.
Both T Bell and Hinch.
Yes. So we've got to go by their nicknames. We've got the mayor of Hinchtown, T Bell, Captain Obvious, and I don't think I've got any more nicknames on that front.
Well, hasn't been any pit reporters announced.
No. There could be. Well, I know of a pit reporter that has recently become available, which I think we discussed.
Not quite. Apparently the pit reporter you're going with is apparently going to be with IMSA still.
Well, that actually doesn't surprise me at all. We're of course referring to Shea Adam. Anyway, if there's any Fox execs listening at the moment, I'm available. Moving on.
This broke earlier today. Apparently there was a small fire at in the yellow garage of the at Daytona in the infield at Daytona. Apparently it was, I believe, some kind of electrical fire, but here's the statement from John DeGeese, who said the statement from Daytona on the fire. Quote, "There was a structure fire located in the yellow garage area at Daytona International Speedway on Tuesday afternoon. There were no injuries, and on-track activity resumed after a very brief delay." Adding, "Thanks to the quick work of the Daytona Beach Fire Department and the Daytona International Speedway Emergency Services team, the fire was quickly contained and extinguished. The state fire marshal is investigating the cause of the fire."
That's good that there's no injuries. That's basically the best possible outcome from that.
Yeah.
And
okay.
And everyone at and I think we should all give a shout out to the track safety teams everywhere, because without them,
doesn't happen.
Without them, they are the real heroes here, and the first responders in the Daytona Beach area is just a huge amount of respect to them, and
really, we should shout them. We should really shout them out every single episode, because we wouldn't be able to do this without them. Okay, we should move it on. I just want to end the show with some listener comments. I should mention to anybody listening, if you're listening on either Spotify or YouTube, if you would like a comment read out on the show, please leave a comment in the comment section below, and I might read it out on the next episode. And also, if you're on Spotify as well, feel free to give us a 5-star review. I wouldn't mind a little bit more Spotify activity as well. The YouTube activity has been fantastic, by the way, because we actually had our most popular episode air last week, which is really good. We're going to start us off with a comment from and we've lost Chris, unfortunately, but we'll rattle through the comments anyway. So a comment from Justin Kids, who said that the Daytona, his first Daytona 24 that he watched on live TV was in 1991. This was in reference to the fact that we talked about the fact that, Caitlin, you and I, your first Daytona that you watched was in 2017.
Yeah.
So he says, first Daytona 24 I watched on TV was 1991, which is a very interesting fact. And Justin also had something to say on the livery front. So he said the best new livery was the Trackhouse Corvette, which I think, well, in response to that, I think that was personally a very good choice. And he says the worst one by far is the Gradient Ford. What the hell were they thinking? Personally, I think that the Gradient Ford, it's not bad, but it certainly isn't the best of the new liveries.
Well, liveries are adverts, and if it's memorable, then it's working. So I guess bad liveries aren't really bad in that way.
No. Well, thank you very much, Justin, for sending that in. We do like little tidbits of information like that, so that was really good. We've got also a comment from FQ Eagles, who says, great podcast. That's all we had to say, which we appreciate.
Thank you very much.
So we appreciate the praise. We end off with a comment from Robin Tailsfighter, who noticed something in last week's episode. He left a timestamp and said, the Dragon Speed entry is done with support from Risi, so they are still sort of there, just not under their own name. So this is, of course, in reference to the fact that Risi Competizione, they won the GTD Pro class at the Rolex 24 at Daytona last year, but were not in attendance this year. However, the Dragon Speed Ferrari is being run by Risi, so they are technically still there. That's very observant of you, Robin Tailsfighter, and thank you very much for leaving that comment. And I think that's just about all we've got time for. Welcome back to the show, Chris.
Yep, you're just in time for us to finish.
A little bit of echo there.
Sorry, I had a connection issue.
Yes, we have rattled off all the comments, although I can assure you that they were all very nice. Thank you, everybody, for listening in this week. My name has been Jack McKenzie, and I have, of course, been joined on the mic by the wonderful Chris Whitfield and Caitlin Penny commentary. Enjoy the Rolex this weekend.
And enjoy the MX-5 Cup tomorrow.
Absolutely. That's all from us. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Ta-ta.
Ta-ra!